Welcome to Life Stories, where we share real and inspiring experiences that touch the heart and offer valuable lessons. In today's story, we dive into a dramatic journey of family conflict, love, and empowerment. A young woman's wedding night takes an unexpected turn when her mother-in-law storms into their honeymoon suite. Determined to drive a wedge between her and her husband, what follows is a tale of strength, boundaries, and the realization that sometimes the most powerful choice is walking away. Stay tuned as we unravel this unforgettable life story. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to start today's story. It was supposed to be the happiest night of my life. The night Michael and I would finally begin our journey together as husband and wife. We had been planning this day for months, pouring our hearts into every detail, every moment. The venue was perfect. Our friends and family gathered around to witness our love. And everything was going as planned. I had walked down the aisle in a dress I had dreamed of since I was little. And Michael looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. Everything was magical, at least. That's what I thought. But no sooner had we entered our honeymoon suite than my fairy tale began to unravel. Michael and I had just arrived, still glowing from the wedding. The champagne already chilling in the corner. The door clicked shut behind us. And for a moment, we shared a quiet, private smile. Finally, just the two of us. No more wedding planning, no more interruptions, just us, alone. But then, suddenly, there was a bang, so loud it rattled the paintings on the walls. The door to our suite burst open like a storm. And there she was, Barbara, my mother-in-law. She stood in the doorway, eyes wide with fury, her face flushed red with anger. Without hesitation, she marched in, her heels clicking across the floor, her hands gripping the doorframe like a woman on a mission. And then, in the most shrill voice, she commanded, "You need to sleep in separate rooms." I froze. I genuinely thought she was joking. Surely, she couldn't be serious. After everything, after all the effort I had put into this day, surely she wasn't going to ruin it like this. But when I looked at her, I could see the sheer determination in her eyes. She wasn't joking. She wasn't being dramatic. She was, in her mind, completely justified. I laughed, nervously at first. It didn't make sense. Why on earth would she think she could come in and demand something like that? I was about to say something, when Michael, who had been watching the scene unfold, sighed deeply, like he had expected this. And then, with the calmest expression I'd ever seen, he said, "Actually, I have a better idea." My heart skipped a beat. What on earth was he talking about? I had no idea what he meant. But the look on his face was one of sheer resolve. Without another word, he reached into his suit pocket, pulled out a thick envelope, and handed it to Barbara. I watched as her face immediately shifted from outrage to confusion. She ripped it open, her hands trembling slightly as she read the papers inside. Her face drained of color. And for the first time that night, she was completely silent. I still didn't know what was in that envelope. But I could feel it, whatever it was. It was important. Whatever Michael had handed her was a game changer. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. Then, finally, after what seemed like an eternity, she whispered, "You wouldn't." "Oh, I already did," Michael replied, his voice calm but firm. His words hit the air like a stone dropped into still water. Barbara looked up at him, her eyes filled with anger and desperation. But Michael stood his ground, arms crossed over his chest, unwavering. "Let me explain," he began, and as he spoke, I could see Barbara's expression shift from frustration to panic. It was as though she could sense that she had finally met her match. A month before our wedding, Barbara had pulled one last stunt. She had called Michael's boss, telling them that he was considering quitting his job and, worse, that he was emotionally unstable and in need of a break. She had lied to his employer, trying to sabotage his career, all because she thought if Michael lost his job, he would have no choice but to move back home with her. It had backfired, of course. Michael's boss called him directly, confused about the accusations. Michael had immediately realized what had happened. And that was the final straw. He had gone no contact with Barbara after that. He didn't tell her. He didn't warn her. He just cut her off completely. And that, I now realized, was when everything changed. Barbara, having realized she had pushed too far, had begun to beg me to convince Michael to talk to her. But I refused. That only made her angrier. And in her desperation, she retaliated. She had sabotaged the wedding, ruined my dress, humiliated me publicly at the ceremony. And now, in the most dramatic way possible, she had burst into our honeymoon suite to demand we sleep in separate rooms. But Michael had prepared for this. As I stood there, stunned, I began to understand the full extent of the situation. This was no longer just a confrontation between a new bride and her overbearing mother-in-law. This was the culmination of years of manipulation, control, and lies. Michael had been fighting this battle for a long time. And now, in front of me, Barbara was about to learn the consequences of her actions. As Barbara continued to stand there, clutching the envelope, her fingers shaking as if the paper itself might burn her, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity. She looked completely undone, like a woman who had been caught in a web of her own making. And yet she didn't seem to fully comprehend the gravity of the situation. I glanced at Michael, who remained as calm as ever, leaning back against the dresser, arms folded across his chest. His quiet composure was a sharp contrast to the emotional storm that had just exploded in the room. I knew him well enough to understand that the calmness was no act, it was who he was. Especially when he had made up his mind about something. And right now, he had made up his mind. He was done. Barbara's voice broke the silence. Almost a whisper. You can't be serious. You can't do this. Michael's eyes never left her. I already did. You've crossed every line, Mom, for years now, and I've had enough. I wanted to speak, to say something comforting, but I stayed quiet. This wasn't my fight, it was Michael's, and he needed to face it his way. Barbara's eyes shifted between him and the envelope in her hand. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, as if she was trying to piece together what had just happened. To make sense of the legal document she was holding. Her mouth opened and closed several times, as though she was trying to find the right words. But nothing came out. It was clear that the full weight of what had happened hadn't yet sunk in. This wasn't just a simple disagreement or an emotional outburst. This was legal, binding, and irreversible. I took a step closer, hoping to offer some support to Michael. But before I could, Barbara's face twisted in anger once again. She let out a sharp breath and threw the envelope on the floor, stepping away from it as though it had burned her. You think this will stop me? You think this will make me go away? Michael didn't flinch. I'm not asking you to go away, Mom. I'm telling you that you don't get to control me anymore. I've had enough of your manipulation, your lies, and your constant interference in my life. Barbara's hands were now trembling. I could see the fear creeping into her eyes. But there was something else there too, something darker. It was a sense of entitlement. As though she couldn't understand how or why Michael could ever reject her, could ever cut her out of his life. She had always been the center of his world, the person he would turn to for everything. And to her, the thought of losing that control was unbearable. But it was too late. Michael had already made his decision. And now, he was forcing her to face the consequences of her actions. I had known for years that Barbara was difficult, manipulative and self-centered, but I never imagined it would come to this. I never thought she would push Michael this far. But now, as I watched her standing there, her face a mask of desperation, I realized how deep her control over him had gone. Barbara's actions were never just about her. They had always been about her need to control every aspect of Michael's life. She couldn't stand the idea of him becoming his own person, of him growing up and creating a life that didn't revolve around her. Every decision he made, every step he took, she was there, hovering in the background, making sure he didn't stray too far from her grasp. I could feel the tension building in the room, thick and suffocating, but I knew that it was necessary. Michael had to do this. He had to stand firm. I had always admired his calmness in the face of adversity, but seeing him now, resolute in the face of his own mother's fury, was a revelation. Barbara was no longer the all-powerful figure in his life. She was just a woman who had overplayed her hand. And now she had to face the consequences. The envelope she had dropped on the floor wasn't just a piece of paper. It was the final step in severing the ties that had bound her to him for so long. For the first time in years, Michael was free, and I could see it in his eyes. As the days passed, things started to settle down. Michael and I had never felt more at peace with our decision to cut ties with his mother. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary for our happiness and future. We had built a life together, free from manipulation, free from guilt, and free from the constant tension that had been part of Michael's life for so long. Barbara, on the other hand, was left to deal with the aftermath of her actions. The fraud investigation, the restraining order, and the consequences of her lies had destroyed her reputation. Her family, once so eager to defend her, now turned their backs. Even her friends distanced themselves, unable to ignore the truth anymore. She had lost everything, and the pain of that loss was something I couldn't help but feel a little sorry for her about, but only a little. We had learned a profound lesson through all of this. Sometimes, the people who love us the most are the ones who can hurt us the deepest. It's not always easy to stand up for ourselves, especially when it means breaking ties with family. But we had done it, and we were stronger for it. A month later, Michael received a letter from Barbara. She was asking for forgiveness, begging to be part of our lives again. She had lost everything, her home, her friends, her reputation. She admitted that she had learned her lesson. But Michael didn't hesitate. He read the letter, looked at me, and without a word, tossed it into the trash. We had won, not through fighting, not through screaming, but by letting Barbara destroy herself. And as we planned our next adventure, a luxury trip funded by the same money Barbara had tried to steal, we knew one thing for sure: some battles are won by walking away. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more life stories. Stay tuned for more inspiring and heartwarming tales.